Good morning, everyone. We had a very robust discussion in the caucus meeting today around issues connected to Syria, which we'll talk about momentarily, and we have three distinguished co-chairs of the Caucus National Security Task Force with us, but also on H.R. 3, which is part of our continuing effort to lower health care costs on behalf of the American people. We promised in advance of November of 2018 that were we given the opportunity to serve in the majority, we would focus like a laser beam on driving down the high costs of life-saving prescription drugs. The American people pay more for prescription medication than any other developed country in the world. We pay more than Canada or Australia or Japan or Great Britain or France or Germany, oftentimes 5 or 6 times the amount for the same drug manufactured in the same location. It's unacceptable, and there's an emerging bipartisan consensus that we need to do something about it. H.R. 3 is the vehicle to accomplish that objective by finally giving Medicare and the federal government the power to negotiate lower drug prices on behalf of the American people. And we'll be moving forward expeditiously in advancing this legislation over the next few weeks. Let me now yield to my distinguished Vice Chair of the caucus, Katherine Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you all again. We had a very busy 2 weeks at home in our districts. Democrats had hundreds of events, meeting with constituents, meeting with people at home to discuss the For the People agenda and following through on our promise to fight, as the chairman highlighted, for lower prescription drug costs, to make sure that we increase pay through strong economic growth. We've already done that with bills that increase the minimum wage, that ensure pay equity for women, and to clean up corruption in Washington. Just this week, we are going to be passing the SHIELD Act of 2019 to make sure that we are strengthening and closing loopholes to keep foreign interference out of our elections. These are the issues that we are hearing loudly and clearly from home they want us to focus on. We are not sure how Mitch McConnell is taking a paycheck any longer because he is refusing to work on the bills that we have sent over. These are the bills Americans sent us here to do their work, and we are going to do both things. Continue to legislate, continue to bring those issues from home to talk about here at the Capitol, and also to investigate. And we are so pleased to have 3 members of the newly formed National Security Caucus with us today, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Xochitl Torres-Small.
Well, as a new member of Congress, I have the honor of serving in the House Armed Services Committee. And as a civilian, I have the opportunity to learn from men and women in service and veterans who have taught me a great deal about our national security and what true service means. And one of the things that I've most learned from these men and women with valor is how important it is to build trust with the people with whom you fight. And that's why the situation in Syria is so concerning, because our Kurdish allies fought with United States Special Forces and others to protect the world from ISIS and took that fight all the way to Raqqa and then held the line. And because of that work, we were able to secure a very unstable situation. Now, the challenge is that the president's impulsive decision has created a chaos that has allowed President Erdogan to make these dangerous and reckless actions. And it has disturbed the balance with our allies. It is deeply unsettling that we are proceeding without a long-term strategy. And that is what we all have to work together to do. Because in this chaos, we are emboldening our enemies. And that is why I am pleased that at least we have a bipartisan call to action that we have to protect our Kurdish allies. This is the issue that Secretary Mattis quit over. This is something we have to work together for. And we must do this work and not allow other things to distract us. So as we work together to protect our allies, we must reinforce the importance and stand up against impulsive decision-making that has reckless consequences, and stand for a long-term strategy to provide stability in the Middle East. I have the honor of introducing my colleague, Congressman Andy Kim, who can speak more to the importance of our relationship with our allies.
Thank you. I know that the issue of Syria and Turkey has been looked at from a lot of different angles over the last week and a half or so. So I just want to add a particular lens that I thought might be useful for you. For me, about 5 years ago, I was at the White House National Security Council working on the counter-ISIS issues. I was there in the room when we were deciding how to move forward with the Syrian Kurds as well as with President Erdogan at the time. We knew that this was going to be an issue of reckoning, one that we would have to confront. But I'll tell you, we never would have imagined at that time that it would come to an end in the way that it has, with the level of recklessness and dysfunction that we've seen over the last 2 weeks. You would ask any counterterrorism expert, anybody that's been out there working on the counter-ISIS fight, they will say that our work there with the Syrian Kurds, with the SDF, has been the pinnacle of the type of work that we've done in terms of partnering with local forces in terms of train, advise, assist. And they say that because of the level of precision and the level of strategy that went into this work, and how we were able to have an outsized influence given the low level forces that we had out there. It was really an example unlike anything else we'd seen across the world. To see that level of precision be torn apart and dismantled in the way of the recklessness that we've seen, it just gives nothing in terms of the credit due to the people that were doing the fighting. And it leaves us terribly exposed to the resurgence of ISIS and other terrorism groups in the region. Congressman Crow and I just got back from a trip to Turkey, Afghanistan, in that area. And when we were in Turkey, we certainly heard the concerns straight from our own ambassador about the real threats there. Not only did I leave that and then see come at this from a level that our ambassador certainly didn't know what was about to happen, and just the level of discoordination within our own government, but he also flagged at that time just the real dangers we're going to experience as well going forward with the battle over Idlib, which is going to happen soon. So we're going to see another wave of violence and refugees and migration in Syria, Turkey, that could even put a lot of the unrest that we see right now to just really overshadow what's happening right now. So we're going to face this problem for a long time to come. And we need to really make sure that we're pushing hard and having a strategy to pull ourselves out of this morass that we're in right now. I would like to turn it over to Congressman Crow for his comments here.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chairman Jeffries and Vice Chair Clark, for your continued leadership. We appreciate it. I'm very honored to be here today with the co-chairs, Andy and Sochil, of the House Democratic Caucus's National Security Task Force. As an Army Ranger, when I served in Iraq and Afghanistan, we frequently worked with local forces, not just because it was important, but because it was essential. We could not have accomplished our missions without them. They knew the terrain, they knew the culture, they knew the language, and they knew how to help us fight and win the battle. So we now know that America is strong because we have friends, right? Since the end of World War II, we don't go it alone. We have friends, we have partners, we have allies, and that is a huge source of our strength. I have seen it firsthand on the ground fighting overseas for this country. But the bottom line is the reckless decision of this president sends a very clear message to those friends and to those partners. And that is the American handshake doesn't matter. That we won't be there for you when you need us. And that's a dangerous message, and it'll make it much harder for us to recruit partners recruit allies, and work with people going forward to secure our country. As Andy just mentioned, we just returned from a delegation trip to the Middle East where we heard directly from our diplomats, our intelligence officers, and our top military commanders who explained to us and described to us the huge dangers of ISIS reconstituting and returning to the battlefield. Across the board, all of them expressed concern about the 11,000 ISIS fighters that are in these makeshift prison camps, schools, warehouses surrounded by razor wire, that are currently either unsecured or becoming unsecured. And we also know in the last couple of days, several hundred ISIS sympathizers have now escaped. So this is a huge danger to America, to our national security. We are in a much worse position now than we were 2 weeks ago, and America is less safe. I'll end with this. I learned a long time ago in the Army that you don't do anything without a plan and without consulting your allies. So, Mr. President, what is your plan? The American people in Congress deserve to know how you are going to keep this country safe, how you are going to build our alliances and our partnerships and move us forward.
Let me just thank Congressman Crow, Congressman Kim, Congresswoman Xochitl Torres Small for their tremendous leadership. We have 63 new members of the House Democratic Caucus of the United States Congress. We're so thankful for the wealth of experience and leadership and thought and intellect that they bring to the caucus. It's a benefit to the caucus, but more importantly, it's a benefit to the Congress and to the country, and we appreciate their leadership of the National Security Task Force. With that, questions?
That never happens.
Cheryl?
So Republicans have argued very forcefully that the inquiry into impeachment is not legitimate without, without a vote. So how can you convince the public that it is indeed legitimate? Why not take a vote on the House floor to fully authorize it as was done with Clinton and Nixon?
Well, we are in the process of communicating to the American people what's at stake in terms of the wrongdoing that occurred by the president that is hiding in plain sight. Donald Trump betrayed his oath of office. He abused his power by pressuring a foreign leader to target an American citizen for political gain and withheld $391 million in aid to accomplish that invidious objective. That is textbook abuse of power. It betrays and undermines our national security as well as the integrity of our elections by soliciting foreign interference in the 2020 election. That is the issue. Now, it's my understanding that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are strict constructionalists. They believe in the original intent of the United States Constitution. There is nothing in the United States Constitution that requires the House of Representatives to vote on an impeachment inquiry. There is nothing in Supreme Court precedent. There is nothing in the federal rules of procedure. There is nothing in the House rules. They are unable to defend the indefensible, and so the Republicans are arguing about cosmetic procedural matters and ignoring the grave national security concerns that were implicated by the president's aberrant behavior.
Are you concerned that if you did have a vote, it would effectively enable them to have subpoena power?
I'm glad you asked that question. So if you actually take a look at House Resolution 581, which was passed on October 8th of 1998, and that's the resolution that presumably establishes precedent related to subpoena power. What it says is that authority by the committee may be exercised by the chairman and the ranking member acting jointly, or if either declines to act, by the other acting alone, here's the key, except that in the event either so declines, either shall have the right to refer to the committee for decision the question whether such authority shall be so exercised, and the committee shall be convened promptly to render that decision. What does that mean? That means that according to the resolution that the House Republican majority passed in 1998 related to the impeachment inquiry that it launched, that either the committee chair and the ranking member had to come together and agree to issue a subpoena. But if the committee chair declined, pursuant to the ranking member's request, the ranking member didn't have an automatic right to issue a subpoena at that point in time. They had to take a vote before the committee of jurisdiction. That's the resolution that the House Republicans are pointing to. So what do the rules of the Intel Committee say? Generally, this is 10A of the Intel Committee's rules, all subpoenas shall be authorized by the chair of the full committee upon consultation with the ranking minority member or by vote of the full committee. Can you tell me the difference? There is no difference. The Republican minority has the same exact subpoena power now that the House Democratic minority had during the Clinton impeachment proceedings. So why are we having this discussion? Because the Republicans cannot defend the indefensible. This is about national security. This is about abuse of power. This is about betrayal. This is about the integrity of our elections. This is about the United States Constitution.
Yesterday, the House passed a series of Hong Kong-related bills. Overnight, China said they would vow massive retaliation on the economic front. What's your reaction to China saying that? Does that give you pause about having this enacted? And have you heard from the Senate whether they think?
We have not heard from the Senate, but I think it's important for the House to express its will as it relates to what is taking place. That's what we did last night. We hope to find common ground with the Senate, and we'll figure out how to move forward. I don't know if Catherine or our national security folks want to add.
I know you've talked about the seriousness of the Syria issue here, and you talked about the handshake maybe not meaning as much here. You've also talked about other policy issues. Obviously, impeachment is a very tough issue for the caucus, and what people need to be thinking in a macro political way, that the decision, considering how serious Syria is, actually gives you an opportunity to talk about something else and other problems with the president. And does that help you politically and not address impeachment directly, but address this foreign policy issue instead? I mean, you brought your national security folks today, to talk about that, not impeachment.
Well, we have consistently indicated that we are going to continue to do the business of the American people as it relates to our domestic policy responsibilities and our foreign policy responsibilities. We are actively moving forward on our For the People agenda as it relates to lowering health care costs with a focus on prescription drug pricing. We want to enact a real infrastructure plan that fixes our crumbling bridges, roads, and tunnels, and we want to get to yes on the USMCA. At the same time, we have a responsibility to deal with these very serious national security issues implicated in Syria. Jason or Andy?
Yeah, I just have always rejected the false choice that we have to choose between our oversight obligations and protecting national security and moving forward on things like prescription drugs. The Constitution envisions a Congress that can and must do all of those things, and that's what we're doing. We're going to exercise our oversight responsibility, maintain the checks and balances. We're going to address national security threats as they arise, and we're going to move forward on the kitchen table issues that America needs us to move forward on.
When I got back from the trip to the Middle East, I had a town hall on Afghanistan in the district, and I'll tell you, it was a packed room, and a lot of people there are very concerned about what's happened on the national security front. In the last 2 weeks, the number one issue that I got questions about from people in the district is about their concerns over what happened with Syria and Turkey. I think they see this as an example of where American global leadership is right now. They see it as an example of the recklessness of this president's foreign policy decision-making process. And it worries them greatly about not just this issue, but any number of other issues that might come up going forward. They just don't feel like they're in good hands right now.
But if I can follow up, and any of you can feel this, isn't that the essence of the question, is that the public, you say the number one issue was about Syria after you returned from the region, that the public perceives the Democrats are just trying to impeach, and there are these other key issues to talk about, whether it be prescription drugs, USMCA firearms, Syria, and that gets drowned out because of the impeachment conversation.
We have an ability, as long as we continue to focus on the kitchen table pocketbook issues of importance to the American people when we are back at home, as well as the national security issues of concern when we're back at home, as our members did in an extraordinary fashion over the last 2 weeks, to make sure that the people ultimately understand what the House Democratic Caucus is all about, which is to get things done, to find common ground where possible, to move things over the goal line in the best interest of everyday Americans. That's what we're doing. In the previous 2 years, much of the discussion inside of the Beltway was centered on the Mueller investigation. But guess what? The midterm elections were about health care. Why? Because we had members, then candidates, like Jason Crow and Andy Kim and Sochi and Max Rose and Anthony Brindisi, Antonio Delgado, the list goes on and on and on, talking about kitchen table pocketbook issues. And that's what we're all about. That's what we'll continue to do. And we place our faith in the American people.
On the situation in Syria and Turkey, is there anything that Congress can do outside of this approval resolution of potential sanctions to course correct legislatively?
Well, as you know, later on today, there will be a White House conversation that is going to be bipartisan in nature, that Speaker Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, I believe Jim Clyburn, as well as Chairman Engel and Chairman Smith, I think, are participating in. The American people across the ideological spectrum have clearly indicated that the actions that the president has taken in abandoning our ally and bolstering the position of 4 different entities that are enemies: Iran, Assad, Russia, and ISIS, is reckless and irresponsible. And we're going to do everything that we can, pursuant to the authority that we have as a separate and co-equal branch of government, to turn the situation around.
I'd just like to add that the resolution also has another purpose besides directly trying to influence the actions of Turkey. And that is to say to our allies around the globe that the United States Congress understands what our president has done and that he has betrayed the Kurds. And that sends a very dangerous message around the world, as Congressman Crow said, that you can't trust us. And we are hoping with this resolution not only to be able to apply pressure, but to give that signal to world leaders that the United States Congress understands the dangerousness of the course that this president has put us on, and we want to restore the good faith and name of the United States.
Can I just follow up on Syria? Do you think the president's conduct in Syria gives you, bolsters your case to the public that this president needs to be impeached?
No, and I don't think we've connected one with the other. The facts speak for themselves as it relates to the president's conduct in terms of Syria and Turkey: reckless and irresponsible, jeopardizing an ally, enhancing the position of 4 different enemies. The actions of the president as it relates to the Trump-Ukraine scandal speak for themselves. The timeline speaks for itself, right? Congress, in a bipartisan way, authorized $391 million in military and economic aid to the Ukraine. Ukraine is a friend, Russia is a foe. Ukraine is a democracy, Russia is a dictatorship. Ukraine is currently under attack by Russian-backed separatists. The United States is probably the only thing standing between Vladimir Putin and Ukraine being completely run over by Russia. In that context, Ukraine is incredibly vulnerable. Yet $391 million in aid was withheld as a high-pressure tactic. In February, the Trump administration wrote to us in Congress and said, the aid is on the way. It never arrived. In May, the Department of Defense wrote to Congress and said, the aid is on the way and all necessary preconditions for the receipt of the aid have been met, including the implementation of anti-corruption protocols by the new Ukrainian administration. The aid never arrived. Twice during the summer, Mitch McConnell called up the administration and asked about the aid. He never got a satisfactory answer because there is no legitimate answer. Then on July 25th, the president pressures a foreign power to target an American citizen for political gain. The Ukrainian president appears to agree, buckling to the pressure of the withheld aid. And subsequently thereafter, the aid is finally released. That is an abuse of power, and the timeline, the president's actions, the betrayal speaks for itself. Congress has a responsibility to legislate. Congress has the need to litigate. Congress has a constitutional obligation to investigate. We will do all three, and we will do it well. Thank you.